This is Matthew McConaughey.
Natalie Portman.
James Patterson.
Michael Ian Black.
And you are listening to
Five Questions
with Dan
Schawbel.
Brian, welcome to Five Questions.
Thank you.
What inspired you to get into comics as a teenager, and why do you continue to work in the industry today?
Oh, that's 8 questions. Well, I actually decided very early, before I was a teenager, at the age where I first could discover that someone's job was this. Like, I was reading comics at a very early age. It was transformative to me. I know people in all kinds of mediums who have felt this experience, that you're not just reading a story, you're connecting to it on every level, spiritually, cellularly, like everything about it is consuming you, and you realize it's like how you want to communicate to people. And then as soon as I came to that weird conclusion, oh, this is someone's job. Look, someone, you can see the credits in the beginning, these little names here, they're responsible for this feeling that I feel. I will do that for a living. That will be my job. And I announced it at a Passover dinner table. I've recently written about this.
Coincidentally, it's like Passover now, almost.
Yeah, no, it is. And it makes me think. I had a couple of Passover dinner moments that were comic book related. One was I did stand up at the table and say, "Excuse me, who's the artist of Spider-Man?" And my mom goes, "I don't know." Well, I will be the artist of Spider-Man. And I sat down as if I declared it. I Babe Ruthed it, years later, my mom, who's really like the only person that was like aware of what was going on with me at that age, said, "Hey, do you have memories of like talking to me endlessly about Spider-Man and telling me how it was your job?" And she goes, "Man, you got close. I mean, that's amazing. Like you like the full determination that I will be working on Spider-Man." I never drew an issue, but I did get to write like over 200. So that worked out pretty good. And then the other Passover thing is I had my friend Mark Andreyko, also a well-known comic creator, Manhunter at DC. He came over years ago and started telling me about Elliot Ness and the Torso Killer. And we started the beginnings of creating the graphic novel Torso at Passover dinner. Not appropriate Passover dinner conversation.
Well, I need to maximize my Passover dinner
Well,
to be able to get more out of it above and beyond just a nice dinner with family.
Well, Jews know, but people who don't know, Passover is a very long dinner. There's plenty of time to multitask and tangent.
Especially if you're Orthodox.
Yeah, but not if you're doing serial killer nonfiction. Anyway, so yeah, I decided it early, and then I went on just never stopped working towards the goal of learning how to do it, learning how to write and draw, sometimes pre-internet. So it felt a little bit like an archaeologist. There wasn't any classes. There was not a lot of textbooks. You just had to conjure through magazines and comic buyer's guides for hints and tips and pens to use and stuff. So that was my journey, all from a very young age, all through grade school and high school, and I never stopped. But what you learn is that feeling you get reading comics or having that story told to you, giving that feeling to someone is 1,000 times more powerful. It is 1,000 times more of what I was looking for, and I was so excited when I discovered that. So I like to tell people, like, if you love that feeling, go make a comic. Even if you connect with 2 people, it's an amazing feeling.
Well, it's come full course for you too, because in the way in which you were impacted by other artists and writers, you are doing the same for other generations and other people, regardless of generation too.
Not always easy for me to see it that way, but thank you.
Well, you've worked on many characters over your career. You've introduced Miles Morales to the world with Ultimate Fallout 4.
Yay!
I got this guy right here.
New trailer dropped right up there.
Yeah, cool. Real good. Very positive reaction. When went into the creation of this character, why do you think he resonates, and what do you think that future looks like?
Well, first of all, I congratulate you on your slabbed Ultimate Fallout. Anyway, I don't know if it's for me to say. All I can tell you is that everyone involved with creating Miles did so in the best headspace. In the like, it was done out of pure what if and yes and what can we do to be better as creators and strive to do more in our jobs. And Miles came out of that questioning ourselves in success, not in, sometimes new things are created out of, oh, this ain't working, try something else. And we all know that feeling, but this was everything was working out really well. But what else could we do? And that's where Miles came from. It was a very long conversation, went on for a couple of years. And when we were ready to go, we were ready to go. And I think that kind of love and curation spilled over to the filmmakers and spilled over to the game makers. That part is a little mystifying to me, a little almost mystical. Like, there's so many artists and creators and collaborators that some of which I know, some of which I'll never meet, some of which are people I've met in other walks of life who are now working on Spider-Verse, like, people I've worked with in the past who I'm not close with, but I'm a big fan of, like Chris Anka and Sanford Green. These are people I've worked with who are also working on Spider-Verse. So their DNA is in it as well. So they feel the pull to work on it. That part I love dearly. I'm humbled by it. And like today would be a perfect example. Like that's a huge deal. Like, my kids woke up and there was Miles and it looked cool. And yeah, there's more animation in invention in that trailer than you see in most, studio films. And I am just so glad that Miles inspires it. I can't take credit for that in any way, shape, or form, other than I'm so happy that he does. Like, I'm so happy that Miles in the Spider-Verse movie in particular makes people want to draw stuff or create stuff. There's something about that. When I was coming up, The Matrix was like that. After you watch it, you just wanted to go make something. I always wanted to be part of something like that, and it feels wonderful.
Yeah, it captivates people's imagination. Actually, Rodney Rothman was on the podcast pretty recently to talk about the upcoming movie and kind of the vision moving forward and everything that goes into it. It's the reason why it turns out so great is because there's a lot of people behind the scenes, and especially with a character this big, the amount of stakeholders, like the stakes are really high. It sounds like some character that potentially is like a throwaway. This is a character that the comic community already has surrounded and it's already been popularized through the video game, through the first movie, etc.
Well, Lord and Miller on the film side are the shepherds of the films and have been just wonderful. It's wonderful to watch them work. It's wonderful to talk to them. I was a fan of theirs before this even came together, and I would just have years and years of just enjoying each other and helping when I can. And it's just a wonderful experience. So I think that kind of energy spills out into the project. Not always, but when it does, you can definitely feel that that's part of it. It's being done for the right reasons and the right way.
Why did you decide to create the weekly comic Fortune and Glory, the music, and how does it relate to your previous work?
Well, before I came to mainstream comics, one of my projects was a graphic novel called Fortune and Glory. And what I had done was I had spent a great deal of the 90s as an independent comic creator, writing and drawing my own books. And with that comes Hollywood's first interest in us in comics. They were like, they knew something was here, but they weren't sure what it was. So we would get these meetings, and sometimes really, really cool meetings with interesting people. And any of these meetings might be like someone writes a check that changes your life. You don't know. Like it's almost like lottery tickets in a way.
Your heart just beats. Like,
you don't know,
something
like,
comes out.
No, like they optioned Powers early, and I'm like, oh, okay, like that's you. You're not thinking about it while you're making the comics. We certainly weren't. We're just sitting in our basement in Cleveland, not going, Hollywood's going to call any minute. It's that you're just thinking about, how do I make this story? And then all of a sudden Hollywood's calling, and some of the meetings are fascinating. Some of the meetings are maddening. Some of the meetings are, just hilarious. You couldn't write a better comedy scene than someone denying you your truth.
I wish there was a movie that captured that, what happens in those like boardrooms and pitch meetings. I
Well,
feel like
there-
that'd be so fascinating.
You do get hints of them, like the player had them. Like there's been like Hollywood has certainly shined a light on itself quite a few times, but at this level, this like low level executive comic book artist thing, I certainly hadn't seen a lot of it. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to write this out and draw this. Also, I felt like I sometimes go through these waves of if something doesn't have an obvious value, I get frustrated. Like I learned nothing. Like nothing came from that. Like it was a waste of time, right? And I hate waste of time. So I said, let me take these wastes of times and turn them into anecdotes in a graphic novel and just blow off steam, get it out of my system, try to figure out where I am in this. Like what do I really want from it? And I didn't think that book would have an audience beyond like certain film nerds and, you know, people on my message board and stuff, but it ended up being the bestseller that I had ever had. It ends up that shitty meetings is a universal truth that I
yes, people hate that.
had accidentally stumbled upon. And even though people who had not lived what I had lived, they certainly were interested in it. And it was, you know, again, early days of internet. So like information like this was, you had to go get it. So Fortune and Glory was like a really nice hit for us. And what a surprise. And I always said, like, I'm going to do more of these. And then Marvel came along. I'm like, oh, I'm definitely going to do a Marvel one. But then the difference between what was going on in Fortune and Glory, which was I didn't understand what was happening and everything was sucked. The Marvel stuff was working out pretty well, you know, after the initial, oh, how do I do this? How do I get in here? Overall, it was going pretty well. And I knew as a dramatist, this isn't a good story. Yeah, we made Spider-Man. It worked out pretty good. It's not a story. So I sat on it for years thinking, what would be my angle? What would be my way in to tell these anecdotes and have fun with it? I read very inspired by Steve Martin's book on stand-up. He wrote a book, and in the book, he pretty much zeroed in, hyper-focused on everything that happened to him until he got The Jerk, which is his big movie debut. And the idea was, I had no idea what was happening until the movie was greenlit. And then everything kind of worked out pretty much for the rest of my life, right? But this part here is where I learned everything. And I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And then I had to find like a place in my life that I could hang that idea. And then the one story that I had that my friends knew, that I talked about a little bit, but not a lot, because I'd only worked on it for 2 weeks, was the Spider-Man Broadway musical, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, which is now a notorious, infamous Broadway legend story. I had worked on it 7 years prior to its stage debut. So the version I was working on and what I was doing with them is a completely different story than the story that people know. But I thought that is such a universally seen disaster of which my small interaction was so ridiculous. Like I shouldn't even been there. I have no connection to Broadway whatsoever, that I thought what a great way to like hang my feelings about comics and all the interactions I've had and how I got here. And then also tell the story of being in the place you should not be, which is, you know, sometimes you say yes to life and you're like, oh, I should not have said yes to this.
But you only say that in hindsight. And
sometimes,
I think
and it doesn't stop me from saying yes now, even with, you know, there's a couple of times Spider-Man the musical being one of the biggest where I'm like, oh, come on, you can't say yes, but you can't say no.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think about it when I say yes to things where I'm like, oh, hope this works out. But a lot of times it does work out, or you get something from it. But this was one I got nothing. So I couldn't wait to share it with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that is something you could say, right?
And also I had the unique experience of the thing I was working on just went away. It just like I was able to look at Marvel and go, guys, this isn't, I don't know if this is a thing. And then it went away. And then years later, it happened, and it was so much worse than anyone could have imagined. And people were getting hurt. I mean, it wasn't even funny. It was like things, you know, chaos was reigning, and I did get to see it. So we'll talk about all that in the graphic novel.
That's great. And I think one of the things that you've talked about is kind of the behind the scenes of what really happens to get something made, to get characters developed, etc. And I think that that's very valuable, not just for comic fans, for people who are interested in the arts, which is most people, right? And I think that I'm very interested in is the process that, you know, you go by and go through with illustrators to bring characters to life. And how do you know which character to use in which medium and when?
Is this the third question?
This is the fourth question.
Fourth question. Okay.
Because you've done comics, video games, TV, film. I'm just curious about, you know, which character, which medium, when, like what do you have a lot of decision around that as you work with kind of illustrators and in studios?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, but it's a frustrating answer other than you go with your gut. I'm a big believer in the going with the little voice, go with that feeling, go with your first impulse. A lot of times there's something driving it. Think about it though, like think about why you're doing what you're doing, and also talk to your collaborators. Often leaning into that conversation, taking it away from my point of view and someone else's point of view offers me a fresh perspective on even my point of view on an idea. Something I've learned about in collaboration is just like focusing as much as you can on your collaborators and away from yourself, particularly if you're the writer of the piece. You're already laying down so much track. You're putting down so much down that it's imbalanced already, even though it's a visual medium. So it's kind of our job as writers to like really be there and listen to the collaborators and hear what's their passion is and what they want to draw. And from these conversations gets to your conversation of what is this? What am I making? Right? I did, to give you a longer answer, part of the Substack situation you're talking about has a project called Creation. We're putting out one today, actually, where I take you behind the scenes specifically to the messy, failure-ridden world of creating things from scratch. And I do so because
it's hard.
No, but I've been teaching at Portland State for over 15 years now, and doing panels and teaching people through podcasts. And what I've learned a couple of things, and one of which is the demystifying something like creating things can be very helpful. Yeah, it's messy and it's riddled with failure. And just say that out loud to people and they go, oh, thank you, because God damn, you should see the amount of crap I have back here that's useless. I'm like, yeah, you're in the middle of it. That's sometimes what it takes. Sometimes it pops out in 5 minutes and it's a perfect pop song or the perfect movie idea or the perfect graphic novel has illuminated itself to you, fully formed, and in your head you just got to go do it. And sometimes it's Legos and Jenga and all at once. And so seeing that failure throws so many people off.
Yes.
And it does. And it sometimes
people hate to fail. I mean, no one loves to fail, right?
And
it's intimidating to people.
And I have a couple of philosophies why, and it's not to blame anybody, but we've grown up not only in the Instagram world of everyone has to be the prettiest all the time, which is we all know not real and fucks with our heads, but we also have been, now we're like decade 2 in this constant parade of craft-based reality programs where you're the best baker or you're the worst baker. You're the best.
Nothing in between.
There's nothing in between, and you're the winner or you're all losers. And that's not what this world is of creating things at all. And in fact, it's so not that I like, oh yeah, no, like I see it in their eyes, like, oh, you think it's a competition or you're competing with your other students or competing with yourself. No, you're making a mess. And the bigger mess you make, the bigger chance you have about succeeding. And I tell people I've gotten to the point now where if I'm fucking up and I'm failing, I get super excited because I know on the other side of this comes Miles, Jessica Jones.
Exactly.
Like I've had the thing come out the other side.
You have to do enough to be able to get enough successes. If you don't put it up enough work, like you do like regularly produced work, if you're not doing that, there's no opportunity to get those big hits.
And also to the point where I've gone the opposite. When failing is happening, I go, "Oh, here we go! Yay!" We're days away from the good stuff, and I have like my body has a good reaction to a mess because I know it's going to happen. Also, you're right. Just sometimes just working, just almost like a mental cardiovascular. Just keep
Exactly.
going.
The other good example that I like to use now when it comes to projects, especially, is the baseball analogy. Like, not everything is going to be a grand slam or a home run. There's nothing wrong with a base hit. It's better than getting out, right? So even those small wins can get you eventually home.
And I went with, like, if every day you write something truthful, like you really said, okay, I have my pages have to do, but I want to write something just very true, even if it's a tiny thing, right? And in a fictional piece, but I write something true every day, then by the end of the year, I've written hundreds of true things, hundreds of them. Maybe 10 of them will land. Right. But at least I've given myself as you said, for baseball. Again, I'm not good with the sports analogies.
I don't know sports either, but it sounds pretty accurate.
I feel like I'm giving myself some like batting average, like a better chance of succeeding, because every day I've made a conscious effort to write something, not just fun or something I really would like to see, but write something truthful, write something is human truth. So. Yeah.
My fellow authors and I, what we do is when we go to write a book, we try and challenge ourselves to write a certain amount of words a day or a certain amount of, maybe pages a day or a week. And that's kind of how we get kind of committed to the project and keep things going while getting better.
Yeah. And most creative people, once there's something on a page, you can't abandon it. It's like
it's a level of investment and commitment.
Honestly, it's birthing. I've birthed this into the physical world. I'm in charge of it. So I'm a big believer in that. So going back to creation though, so like I've learned that sharing the messiness, like we all share the results. We share the cake. Here it is with frosting on it. It's perfect, right? But being taken behind the scenes for other people's process has been very powerful for me. So that's why I like to, like, here's what I can do with my Substack. Here, we're going to take you behind the scenes. Here's what inspired Jessica Jones. Here's what inspired Miles Morales. Here's something that didn't work at all, and here's what I learned from it. So here are the successes, here are the failures, here are the things in the middle, and hopefully sharing that energy empowers people to make a mess in their own space and see what they get from it.
Definitely. And what's your best piece of career advice?
This is so easy, and I'm so happy.
No one's ever said it's easy before.
Because I stumbled upon it, and then everyone I know in education kind of grabbed me by the collar, went, yes, and it's finish what you start. Many people write the first 8 to 10 pages of something and keep writing the same 8 to 10 pages over and over and over again. They keep going back to something, and
they call it writer's block.
or they think it's not writer's block, but they don't see you're on a hamster wheel. You're not writing. You're spinning around in a circle of writing the same scene over and over and over again. And yes, that could feel like writing, but there's also a trap there that you can really, and we've seen it people do all the time. So finish what you start. You kind of don't always know what you're doing until you get to the end. You may have had, like, in your heart, I know why I'm doing this. It's compelling me to finish. But when you get there, you go, oh, now I see it. Now I see what it is. And it's sometimes for me, it's obviously I'm frustrated with somebody, and I had to figure it out in my work. A lot of writers will tell you would get to the end of the project to find out which one of your parents you're mad at. But even if that's it, that's great. You got there, and you know what you have, and you're able to see why other people will get something from it. Also, you don't know really what kind of creator of whatever it is, painter, writer, musician, filmmaker, you don't know what kind of that you are until you finish the thing that you're making. Again, you may have ideas of who you are, and you may have goals for yourself, but until you get there and can assess what you've done, you can't do it. And I will tell you that, talk about fear of failure. Once you finished it, you've not failed. You've succeeded. You've done more than 80-90% of the world. You finished what you started, and that is a magical place to live. It's very fulfilling. Just yesterday, I tweeted about it. I just handed in a graphic novel script, a full graphic novel script. So it's about 140 pages of art. So the script itself is about 165 pages. I think it adds up to about 1,500 pages of writing for me. But you won't. I was telling my kids this, and I'm like, oh, I just handed in. It was like 160 pages. They go, oh, that's not so bad. I go, and my wife looks at me like, yeah, that's what he handed in. That's not what he made. And it felt like such a physical birth. It felt like I felt like there's a huge poop, that and I was like, well, will it ever not feel this way? Will it, I'm at an age where it always feels like, oh my God, I need a day. Yeah. So it's
definitely, I feel that.
So I just wanted to tell people, not only do you get a lot out of it spiritually and intellectually, it physically feels fantastic. When I'm I'm not even done. I still have drafts of polishing, and Andre's going to hand in the art, but just having this physically in the world felt amazing. And I want everyone who wants this feeling to have this feeling. So you have to finish what you start to get it.
That's great advice. And thank you so much for being on the show.
No problem.